Greetings loyal subscribers and honoured guests. Welcome to episode 2 of the C64 review show. I know it has been far too long since I made the first episode, but it's finally back. I have another 4 games to look at this time. Turbocharge from System 3, Rodland from Storm, the Untouchables from Ocean, and Felix in the Factory from Micro Power. Before I get started with the reviews, I just wanted to add that I intend episode 3 to be a viewer request show. I've already received a bunch of requests when I released episode 1, but if there is something that you would like me to review next time, feel free to add your suggestions to the comments for this video, and I will pick 4 games from everything that has been suggested so far. So then, without any more preamble, let's get on with the show. Turbocharge was released by System 3 Software in 1991 and is basically their take on the Chase HQ style of game. Now, I was a big fan of System 3 back in the day. They rarely published anything bad, though some of their games could be pretty challenging. Somehow I missed this one, however, which is quite a shame, as I would have loved it back in the day. It's not really a racing game per se, as there are no opponents to beat to the finish line. Instead, you're up against the clock, your fuel meter and the amount of damage you can take. Should you run out of time, fuel, or the damage meter hits 100%, it's game over. Each stage of the game consists of 2 parts. The first part sees you rush into the border while taking down as many enemy vehicles as you can along the way. There are all sorts of different vehicles to blow up, from sports cars, bikes, trucks, oil tankers and more. Most of them don't fire back at you, they just get in the way. They will do you a bit of damage if they barge into you though. Occasionally there will be hazards on the track that need to be avoided. Anything from traffic cones or barriers to landmines. Sometimes there will be a fuel pickup as well. It's important that you try to keep replenishing your fuel as you go along so that you don't run out. As the levels progress, there will be helicopters and jets attempting to machine gun you as well. When you reach the end of the first part of the stage, the number of enemies you've managed to take out will tick down and your health will be replenished. On the first few stages, it's pretty easy to gain most, if not all, of your health back. Periodically the road will split, however only one way is the correct one. The other one will result in a collision with a brick wall. Luckily the game is fairly forgiving and you will be put back on the road before the split, where you can take the correct path. Most of the time you can tell which is the correct path to take by following the traffic, but every so often it's not so obvious. Once you smash through the border, that's the end of the first part of the level. The second part is all about catching up to one of the enemy leaders, who will drive a fast sports car that can take quite a few hits. If you manage to do enough damage to them before the time limit runs out, they will pull over and they'll be busted. As well as your standard guns, you have missiles as well, which you should save for the battle with the leader. These are fired by holding down on the fire button on the joystick until the crosshair changes, and then releasing. The game has a nice gradual difficulty curve, with the first stage being fairly simple, the second getting a little more challenging, and the third being considerably tougher. The handling feels good, as does the sensation of speed. Turbocharge has been developed specifically for the C64, so Chris Butler could really make use of the system's strengths and not worry about having to slavishly recreate an arcade game or how to port the game onto the Spectrum or Amstrad afterwards. Presentation is top notch with some really fast moving graphics, great tunes and slickly produced cutscenes at the start of the game. It remains good fun to play today and is definitely worth taking for a spin. The second review of this episode is Rodland. This is a super cutesy platform game for 1 or 2 players, similar to something like Bubble Bobble. It was originally an arcade machine, though I don't remember ever seeing the machine personally. The game is something of a sleeper hit, being much more successful on the home conversions than the arcade original ever was. It works really well on 8-bit systems, as each stage takes place on a single screen. I really like the graphics of the C64 version. All of the enemies look great and are really well animated, plus the bosses that appear occasionally are huge. These include a bunch of angry crocodiles, a whale and an elephant, all of which spit out smaller versions of themselves in an attempt to kill you. As the name of the game would suggest, your primary weapon is a rod. You can poke at enemies with it, and the first hit will usually grab the enemy as well, so you can continue to pummel them left and right for a few seconds until they are dead. Defeated enemies will then drop other more powerful weapons such as bombs that create a large localised explosion, dynamite which sends out a screen-wide blast left and right, balls which bounce erratically around the screen and make a very nice boingy noise, and a missile which shoots off in the opposite direction to where you touch it and obliterates anything it collides with. You don't just want to go around killing every creature on the level though. What you should be doing is collecting all of the flowers on the stage, which changes the enemies into these orange blobby things. Then when you kill them in this form, they drop one of the letters that spell out the word extra. If you get them all, then you are granted an extra life by a magical fairy woman. The game is tougher than its cutesy exterior implies, especially if you play on your own. Unless you're using a trainer, you only have a limited number of lives and continues available to you. Playing with someone else makes life a little easier because you can lure enemies away from the other player so they can collect the flowers and you can gang up on bosses as well. The game isn't all that long though, comprising of just 32 screens with a boss encounter every 8 or so. This pales in comparison to the 100 levels of Bubble Bobble, but it could be argued that 100 screens is too much because whenever I tried to complete Bubble Bobble with a friend, we always get bored. Maybe it's the repetitive music, I don't know. Speaking of music, there is a very nice tune on the title screen, but sadly nothing in the main game. The sound effects are perfectly decent, especially the bouncy one, but I would have appreciated the option to have some music instead. Overall, Rodland is a very solid game indeed on the Commodore 64, and if you enjoy stuff like this, then it really should be part of your collection. The few gripes I have with it take the score down to an 8 out of 10, but it's still a ton of fun, especially if you have someone to play it with. Next up is the Untouchables, a multi-genre action game based on the Brian De Palma movie. I have really fond memories of this game, but sadly the gameplay doesn't quite match up to them. I'm going to review each level on an individual basis, at least as far as I managed to get through the game. I didn't manage to get all the way to the end. Before that though, I'm going to cover the presentation. Really, both audibly and visually, the Untouchables on the C64 is top notch. The graphics are very well drawn and animated and represent the scenes that they depict from the movie extremely well. The tunes used in the game are great renditions of familiar ditties, such as the Charleston, and they sound great. My only issue with the music is that none of the tunes are very long, so they will repeat frequently during the longer levels to the point where they start to drive you mad. So then, to level 1, and possibly my least favourite of them all. This level would have worked quite well if it had been a good deal shorter. It's a side-scrolling stage where you take control of Elliot Ness and attempt to recover evidence from the bad guys. You know the enemy you're supposed to kill because they will be in a white suit, and there will also be an arrow pointing in their general direction in the top right corner of the screen after a while. 4 or 5 bullets is enough to take them down, then you have to pick up the evidence they dropped before someone else claims it. One pickup equals 10% of the total evidence required, so you'll have to repeat this process 10 times. Sometimes the guy holding the evidence will be in a really awkward spot though, and you may end up bumping into him. If that happens, then they die, but the evidence isn't dropped. This can be extremely aggravating. There will be a never-ending stream of goons coming after you as well, and as your evidence total increases they start to take more hits, to the point where they really start to get in your way. As well as the standard blue-suited goons, there are green ones that drop more time, grey ones that drop machine guns, and also ones that drop roses, which represent more energy. The level just outstays its welcome by quite a large margin. I reckon if you had to pick up 5 pieces of evidence, then that would have been about right. 10 just takes far too long, and it's a shame because this opening level is a barrier between you and the good stuff that comes afterwards. The second level is a shooting stage, and the controls are a bit weird in this one. They took me a while to get used to them. Down left or down right on the joystick makes your character roll in that direction, and the joystick also aims. The thing about this level though is that there's no crosshair. Instead, your gun sights are in the top right of the screen in a small circle, so you have to try and match up what's in there with what's in the main window. It's not too bad once you get used to it, but there are better things to come. Level 3 is more shooting, but this is much more enjoyable as you get a proper crosshair on screen to aim with. There are a series of different screens representing alleys, and you have to pop out from cover and blast away goons with your shotgun, before hiding again to reload. It's great fun, and it's the best level by far in my opinion. Moving on from there is a stage that represents the most memorable scene in the movie, at least for me. The one where the pram is out of control in the train station, careening down flights of stairs, as Elliot Ness tries to catch up with it while dealing with bad guys at the same time. In the game, the level takes a top-down perspective, and the pram has its own health bar. It's up to you to shoot the goons, push the pram left or right so it keeps going down the stairs, and avoid blowing away the innocent bystanders. It's a decent enough level, and is good to see scenes like this represented in the game. After that is the final stage that I managed to get to, one where a witness has been taken hostage and you have to carefully shoot the baddie without shooting the witness instead. The controls are very tricky in this one, and one failure sends you back to the start of the train station stage. After a few attempts, I decided to leave it there. From what I remember, there were a few more stages after this one, including another shooting level on the rooftops where Al Capone himself appears. Overall, I'm afraid to say the game just doesn't hold up as well as I would have liked it to. The opening stage is far too long and too frustrating, which is a real shame. There is some good stuff in the later stages, and as I said, the presentation is great. As it stands though, the Untouchables gets a 6 out of 10 from me today, for being quite a mixed bag of bad, mediocre and good level design. The final game in this episode is Felix in the Factory. When I booted this game up, I immediately remembered playing it on my old BBC Micro, and as it turns out, the C64 version is an almost direct port of the Beep version. This is gaming at its most simplistic. You won't find any complex narrative or multi-layered gameplay here. It's a pure arcade game in the same vein as something like Donkey Kong. That's fine though, because the game is pretty good fun. Taking control of the titular Felix, your job is to ensure that the generator in the bottom right of the screen is constantly topped up with oil, or it will overheat and break, ending in poor Felix getting fired. The oil meter in the top right is perhaps your biggest enemy in this game, as it never ever ceases to decline, and it does so at quite an alarming rate. So you need to navigate the conveyor belts, carefully hopping over parcels and what appear to be donuts, climb the many ladders and find the oil can. Be careful not to trip on your way back, or the oil will spill and you'll have to go back for some more. Making your life extra difficult are the gremlins inside the machine. These roam around the level and will come after you if you get too close. They also become more aggressive as soon as you grab the oil can. To combat these little buggers, you can pick up a pitchfork, which will allow you to kill them for a short time before more turn up. Periodically, a rat will also run across the screen, squeaking as he goes, and he will kill you upon collision. There is a bag of rat poison that you can grab and then drop on the layer that you think he may run across. So that's the setup, and the game plays pretty well, but it can be quite challenging. That time limit is no joke. You have to be constantly on the move and ready to change your plan at any second to avoid being boxed in by the gremlins. The graphics may look pretty simplistic nowadays, but they were quite decent back in 1984, when the full range of tips and tricks for exploiting the power of the C64 had yet to be discovered. The sound is mainly comprised of bleeps and bloops, with the most impressive audio effect being the squeaks coming from the rat. There is no music to speak of, unfortunately. Summing up then, Felix in the Factory is the sort of game that you'd throw on for half an hour or so, maybe when you don't have time to play something more involved. It's a good time, pretty tough but enjoyable if you're willing to put the practice in. A decent arcade title worth having a go on. That brings us to the end of episode 2. As I said at the start, I intend the next episode to be a viewer request show, so make sure you put your suggestions in the comments. I hope to have the next one up by the end of the year. It definitely won't be 6 months like last time. Hopefully you'll join me then. In the meantime, take care.